This week, so carrying on with the portrait project, and this week I thought I'd do a little demonstration using paint, and it's a mixture of this sort of white back technique that I've done years ago, but this time using one or two colours. So that was a pretty quick one I did last week. So we're looking at using a limited palette of colours. So this is called it's running away. So this one's called the Zorn palette, and there was a painter called Anders Zorn, Swedish painter, very lovely portrait and landscape painter. So I think he must have instigated this particular palette, and it really consists of a white, like titanium white, some yellow ochre, some cadmium red, and some black. So it's like a very limited palette. And I think the idea is that you could then work a bit quicker, and it gives an impression of colour without being very, you're not meant to mix everything with this, but hopefully it will give you some mixes. So I thought I'd combine that with this idea of maybe a white back technique. And it was really actually just doing this very quick painting for Anna last week that made me think, oh, maybe we'll try and do it this way, combine the Zorn palette with this white back technique. So that's the idea there. So I'm going to start with, I think I'll just start with some sort of colour over here. So I'm going to go with the yellow ochre, which is a colour I hardly ever use. I find it a really difficult colour to use, to be honest. So I'll just get something, I like to just have something on the board really. So although this board's got a mid-tone already, I thought it might be quite nice to work into a slightly damper surface. So just working with a nice big brush. I can get some mid-tone brush. I often use, well, occasionally use this one, not that much though. So that gives me a mid-tone. I'm going to do a little bit of white and black. So obviously so I'm thinking where the lights are going to be, perhaps something like that. There, and maybe a little bit on the side of his nose. So just using a bit of tissue really. And then his ear there. So, you know, this is a way and approach to drawing. And sometimes it's quite liberating to just work in a very big, broad way, rather than very carefully draw everything out with a pencil, which is what I did last week. So it's almost like the complete opposite, working with big, broader tones. Not sure what I've done with my other set of brushes, to be honest. I didn't have a set earlier today, which I can't find. So I just pick a few of these ones out. And then thinking of mid-tone, so this area I will mix. Maybe use that big brush. So perhaps some red and black to get, and a bit of yellow actually. So I'm just thinking these darker skin tones here. Might be a bit too dark, so I'll add a tiny bit of white. That's a bit too dark still. That's a bit more yellow, a bit more white. Like that across his forehead. I think I'm inclined to work sort of mid-tone first and then go a little bit darker. Around his eye sockets, sort of around here, it's really quite dark. So I could perhaps just start with some sort of darks like that, and same here. And this is where screwing my eyes up, really just half closing my eyes, just really helps to just sort of simplify tones. His forehead over a little bit there. There's a dark shadow down the middle of his nose. Go for a slightly smaller brush. Places, just get some sort of lines, and then eyebrows will be there. That's the side of his hairline there, go a little bit darker. whole side is really in shadow, isn't it? Sort of blocks some of that in. And then his hairline, again, just go a bit darker again. That's the black and the red. The yellow. The background itself can actually go a bit darker. So let's just make some of this darker too. Now we've got some of his hair. Yeah. Lighten that up a little bit. Shadows on his neck, and then his hairline on the other side. Deeper shadows in there. From there, you can just start to sort of work in a little bit, really. So let's go back to the slightly smaller brush. But actually, so far, I've only used those two. And you're going to define in here a little bit more. Now, because there's quite a lot of wet paint on there already, I might need to sort of lift bits out. So it might be going back to the tissues and the rags. And just lifting bits out. Let's go a little bit lighter. Mouth's going to be about there. A little bit. His nostrils, perhaps. Just kind of keep, you get to that stage and just start working in. Is that enough to?
Looks so easy.
Yeah. Well, you can start to see him emerging, can't you? It's quite a fun approach. Yeah, if you're feeling very confined by just drawing lines and filling it in.
Yeah.
I mean, I could keep that, but it hopefully gives you an idea of what can be too fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And some of these, I don't know, I've got all these. No, I haven't got the one I was thinking of. I did have a book, I left some in the bag because I had loads of these little demos, but I remember doing this very quick sketch of from the model once, and it was a demo, a bit like this, but just in 10 minutes. I was just actually surprised. I don't think I'd ever done something in like 15 minutes. I thought, it's all right, I think I'll just leave that. Because normally I've been working away for weeks and weeks and weeks on painting. Sometimes a quicker approach can be, obviously it's not as accurate, but sometimes there's a liveliness to the brushwork that can give you a different sort of feel. So it's quite a nice one to experiment with. You don't have to approach it that way, but just this limited palette, I think I can get quite a lot of almost, I do a slightly lighter bit for the highlights. So again, it's not going to be that accurate colour mixes, but I should be able to get something similar enough to skin tones. And actually, when you look at some of the old master painters, someone like Rembrandt, I don't imagine he had tons of different colours. There's a lot of brown and a lot of light, a little bit of pink here and there. But that can be, sometimes enough to picking up the dark a bit there. But Enough to, yeah, just a face, right?
Okay.
Any questions? Yeah, okay. Actually, next week I'll do, the demo I'll do next week, I'll do something with pastels. Maybe children with pastels. And then the week following that, I'll start a new project. But if you want to keep going with portraits, that's fine. But I'll start something a bit more texture and landscape. So that'll be because we've actually got 5 weeks in March. I thought I'd do maybe a portrait project and a shorter project on texture. Okay.
Thank you.